This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Thanks, Dad.
I do love a good story. I really love a good story. I don't know if you've seen Shawshank Redemption or Red Treasure Island with Robert Louis Stevenson. There's just great stories. But I've got to say the stories I really love are the stories in the Bible. Now the Bible stories are pretty special. And if we consider the core story of the Bible is Jesus, his sacrifice on the cross, his taking our sin on his body so we could take his righteousness to God. If we see that as like a perfectly made tuning fork, better than any tolerances of any machine that we can make, and it's absolutely perfectly in tune, other stories in the Bible resonate with that story. So you'll hear, any Bible story you read, you will hear hints of that main story. And it's like listening to an orchestra. Often when we go to a Bible story, we've got to consider the whole sound that comes with it. Listen for the resonance, for that perfect tune, the tuning fork, but we're also listening to how it resonates with other sounds that are in the orchestra. So it's like listening to a big orchestral moment, and we can hear the violins and the bass, and we hear it all. So now we're going to have a close-up look at one instrument in this piece, but it's part of an orchestra of stories. And the more we know Bible stories, the more we can enjoy all the story. So by knowing one story, that's fantastic. If you know two, they start to become bigger. 3, 4, 5, they get better and better. So we're going to go look at, with Esther, Queen Esther, we're going to look, where did she live? Because there were some difficult names, I am only going to talk about 4 people in this story today, but there's some difficult ones. So we just remember the names. There's Mordecai, Haman, Esther, and the king, or King Xerxes. And there's even a more difficult way you can say that some people say it. So we'll go to the map of the Persian Empire. This is about 500 BC. And you can see this is a part of the world that there's always been some news. So, like right at the moment, I'm just pointing, just above me there is the Straits of Hormuz. That's a pretty big story. We come across just directly above me there, and there's a place called Susa. That is where King Xerxes had his castle. If we come across a bit further, you can see where Israel and Palestine and Lebanon is, and even to just keep a bit of a local reference, you can see included in this empire of the Persian Empire, there's even Gallipoli on the other side. So it's an area that a lot of big stories have happened in that area. And we look in Susa, there is some foundations of a palace that we've got sitting in the... Scholars have said that bit in the foreground is the part where King Xerxes was sitting in where he was making his announcements. Now the story of Esther begins with a huge get-together of all the leaders of the tribes around in Persia. So they all come together for a meeting. It goes for 6 months. They're drinking like crazy. We get to know, we can see that the king is, capricious, powerful, and he says he wants his current queen to come and do something. She says no, and he says, okay, you're sacked. That's the setup for the story. And then he says to his guys, I need a new queen, better get me one. So they decide to, from the story, it's a beauty contest, talent contest, and they have a way of choosing the new queen. Esther and her uncle Mordecai, who lives at the palace, he's a guy at the front of the palace, he says to Esther, just don't mention that you're a Jew. You don't need to make it public. You can if you like, but don't tell anybody. So while the story is unfolding, we have Mordecai is sitting at the front of the palace, and he overhears a story where two attendants decide that they're going to kill the king. And Mordecai reports this back to the king via Esther. So I missed a little bit just here. I should have gone to the next picture. Oh yes. Always love art. I love the way people imagine how stories would go. And we have here, oh, okay. So yes, I love the way that artists imagine what was going on in these stories. And we have the feast in the background on the left-hand side, and we can see the beauty contest, or it could be like, Australia's Got Talent, one of those shows where people have done something, and we can see various people coming past the king. So this happens, Esther gets married, Esther is selected, and she gets married. And this painting is in the Melbourne Art Gallery, and there's a very similar one in in London, and it's by Edward Long. And what is really interesting with it is this guy was both an academic and an artist, and he was very keen to make sure that the hieroglyphics look like real hieroglyphics that would be in a castle. He selected a frame that frame was his selection that would really match the moment of the Queen. And here we have Mordecai. Now, Mordecai he'd overheard the story, reported to the king, and the king was saved. Then we have the story, we meet Haman. And Haman he's like the power broker amongst the political leaders, and then he gets appointed to the top job. And he decides everybody should bow down to him, which David so well read. He decides everyone should bow down to him, and then Mordecai said, well, I don't. I only bow to the one true God. This has really upset Haman, and he says, I'm going to kill you. Not only am I going to kill you, I'm going to kill your family. This is going to be really bad. So he comes up gets the king to sign a decree, and they go and kill the family. They're going to go and kill everybody. Mordecai hears this and says to his niece, Esther, can you talk to the king? And she says, well, it's the penalty of death if you walk into the king's chamber without an invitation. This is a bit of a risk. And she did just what we would do in this church. She contacted all her spiritual partners and said, can you guys pray and fast for the next 3 days? Now, over the next 3 days, I'm going to prepare myself to go and see the king. And I'll casually get myself into a hallway where I'll see him, and then he will call me or he'll execute me. And hence that line that we read, this is such a big problem. If I live, I live. If I die, I die. But I'm going to do it. So this is Esther. And this is a real hint. This is where I can hear that resonance of Jesus, where he's in the garden saying to God, not my will, but your will. You know, is there any other way I can do this? But Esther has gone with it. So she plans. First thing she does is gets all the church crowd, all her friends from church or people she's known, and said, you've got to pray for me. Now this is where it gets really good. King goes to sleep that night and he wakes up at 2:00 in the morning. He can't sleep. So what do you do when you're a king and you can't sleep? You call in one of your attendants and you say, can you read me the history of our empire? Sorry? Yeah, you'd think that would help. So he gets someone to come and read the history of the empire. Now, in the history, I just opened to some random page. Remember, everyone's praying. No one else knows this is going on. They open the page of the history book and he says, Mordecai saved your life. Mordecai was the one who got you through this plot on you. And the king said, did we do anything to look after Mordecai? Did we give him any favours at all? And they said, no. And the king said, oh, better do something. I better come up with something. So they came a bit later. He said, oh, I'll get one of my people. He needs to be honoured for what he has done. So I'll get one of my people to go and honour him. Then we get 3 days later, Esther walks where she can see the king. The king points his scepter. That means she can come in, as opposed to getting your head cut off, which is pretty scary. So she goes in and says, King, if it pleases you, would you come to a banquet that I will be putting on for you? Would you come to my chamber and I'll put on a banquet, and I'd like you to invite your Prime Minister Haman with you. I'd like you to invite Haman. So Haman hears this and he is really excited, because he thinks, hey, I am, the number one guy, and now I've got the queen as well as the king wanting to invite me over for dinner. This is pretty special. Meanwhile, the king says to Haman, if I wanted to bring great honour to one of my great subjects, what would I do? And Haman thought, that must be me. I'm going to come up with a story that would really bring me great honour. So he said, I would put the best clothes on this man and parade him through town. And Haman said, the king said, Haman, can you do that for Mordecai? And Haman's just absolutely spitting chips at this point. But he's smart, doesn't want to get killed, so he says, okay, he does it. And then he deeply plans the plot of how he's going to kill Mordecai. So he does this parade and he feels completely humiliated, and he says, I know, I'm going to put a big spike out the front of my house and I'm going to impale him on it. That'll be that will make me feel so good. He starts building the spike, and then he's done the walkthrough, and now we go to got some great pictures coming up. Oh, Rembrandt. This is brilliant. With Rembrandt, we've got on the table, we've got Esther in bright light. We've got the king, Xerxes, medium, and Mordecai in the shadows, because he's a pretty shady person. And if we could see on the table, we've got grapes and an apple. Now the grapes would represent salvation, and the apple represents temptation and sin from the Genesis story. This is where it's good to know a few stories and you combine them, you hear it. So we get the Genesis story here, and he's got his royal scepter that he's waving over the top. So we're sitting at the table, he's got them together. Haman's thinking, I've got to get the king to sign a decree that I can go and kill all the people. And Esther says, somebody here wants to kill me and my people. And the king said, well, who would that be? And here we have Queen Esther points at Mordecai. Oh, sorry, Haman, sorry, Mordecai's out the front. Mordecai is out the front being honoured and all those things. So yes, it's only five. Limited myself to a palette of 4 names and I still can't get it right. So yes, there's the 4 of them. So there's 3 of them in the room. The king is so upset about this, that somebody wants to kill his beautiful queen, that he walks out in the garden and goes, that's it. Yeah, he doesn't know what to do. And he comes back in. In the meantime, Haman has been begging for his life. When the king came back in, it looked like that Haman was attacking the queen. At this point, the king just went, that's it. Got his attendants to pull I think they put a bag over his head or something, and said they'd heard then about impaling Mordecai, and he just went, okay, put Mordecai on the spike. That's the end of, and that was the... Okay, yeah. Yes. Okay. How about everybody can tell this story, because we all know it so well. Yes, the story then goes on. Yeah, so this is where the story for me today. This is where the story ends. It does continue. So Mordecai becomes and it is Mordecai because Haman's now dead. Mordecai becomes the prime minister, and instead of, they asked for the decree to be lifted where anybody could kill the Jews. And instead of that, Mordecai said, the king, Xerxes, said, I can't rescind my decree, but I can give you another decree that you can fight back and you have all the weapons of the army. So it ended up with a bit of a fight. It's worth reading. It only takes about 20 minutes to read it from beginning to end, but it's a great Bible story, and it's just a wonderful story to read. So let's move forward to today. On the 16th of August 2026, we can be reassured that even if our situation looks hopeless to us, God has a plan. He may have put people in place before the crisis, and they will be ready. We don't even know what God is doing at the moment. Or he may have us in a place that we will be able to assist a forthcoming crisis that we don't know about yet. In either case, be reassured that God is preparing you now for a future. He has plans for us to prosper. It's Jeremiah 29:11. And in other words, to quote Mordecai speaking to Esther in 4 verse 14, who knows, you may have been made for a time such as this.